Lifeline would take gay kids, send them to conversion therapy, make them watch gay and would strap things to them or put things inside of the girls. And if they had a bodily reaction to the gay, they would be zapped and then forced to smell rotting moose liver. And then they would play straight. My name is Liz. I grew up in a stereotypical LDS Mormon household. I really tried to go with the flow and just get into it really, to try to fit in, but it just didn't really fit for me. So once I was a preteen, about 14, I started to rebel against that. And then that's where it turned into my parents trying to find an alternative for me because they thought I was out of hand, really troubled because I started hanging out with other kids who weren't really going to church. Lifeline was a troubled teen facility that was opened in the early 90s. They are rooted in cult philosophy. A lot of people were sent there in the 70s and 80s. They added their own layers of tactics to make kids behave, treatment method for teenagers especially. And by the time I was sent there, they had been in operation for like 15, 17 years, something like that. And they really preyed on parental fears of parents losing their child to not being the way that their parent thought the kid would be, like not being LDS. And kids from 12 to 18 were in there when I was in there. There were kids in there who never touched a in their life. There were kids in there that just were antisocial. I never considered myself an addict. I never considered myself and unfortunately, a lot of kids actually became addicts after the fact because it was so traumatizing. I had heard of Lifeline because other kids in our neighborhood had been sent there and kids would just disappear. So I was one of those kids where one day I just disappeared from school. It was the week before Christmas in 2007. And I remember waking up thinking I was just going to go to school that day. And I woke up to two large individuals coming into my room. They just told me, "You're going to Lifeline, get up, get dressed, you're leaving." My dad looked like a little bit sad and my mom just seemed like it was just a task, like just get it done. I wasn't like thinking like, oh, I'm getting kidnapped right now. Grabbed a hoodie, got in the car, and they just started driving. And I didn't know where the Lifeline building was. They pretty much just lectured me about my life, saying I'm making bad choices, I deserve to go there, it's all my fault. There were two kids my age who were outside of the building waiting for me. They required me to remove my shoes and my belt, tested me, they did a pregnancy test. We went into the bathroom and they told me, "You're gonna put your hair up now." So I ended up like clipping it back with a ton of different clips, and it had to be in this really specific style where it was pulled back and also got searched down to my underwear, and it's called a shakeout. And everything just got like more and more weird, and it just felt so alien, just so strange. They had me fill out a compulsion list, which I was like, what the hell is a compulsion list? They pulled out this list of all sorts of like character defects that I had to go through and highlight everything that I felt like applied to me. I was like, well, everybody lies and everybody manipulates, but like, I don't consider myself a liar or a manipulator. They're sitting there telling you like, well, have you ever lied? Have you ever manipulated? Have you ever done this? And it's like, well, yeah, like we're all human. And so you have to circle it. Her and the other girl walk me into the group room and walk me up the center of the aisle. And there's a side of girls all sitting and a side of boys all sitting. There were about 100 kids in there. And they made me read my compulsion list that I had filled out in the office and my list that I had filled out in the office, and told I had 3 days to learn the fake sign language. I wouldn't be allowed to talk after 3 days. It becomes the group's responsibility to then hold that person accountable to becoming a better version of themselves, which essentially was just kids attacking kids in group. You would have to go in on each other for your own program to move up and move out. And so the 5 different phases, as you moved along each phase, you earned your rights back. So on the first phase, when you first go in, you have somebody touching you all the time. You don't have your shoes on. You have to search when you go to the bathroom. You're never left alone. You have to ask permission to drink water. You have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. You're not allowed to speak. So as you move up the phases, you earn your rights back. It's a very political game, very gray area game, very coercive game. And you have to do a lot of things in front of group and in front of staff. Inside Lifeline, they had a wall with the 12 steps on it, and then all throughout the building, there were boards with different phrases and kind of like rehab terms and whatnot. We had to memorize the 12 steps, memorize a lot of the phrases that they had around the building. The building was not nice. It was not well kept. It was dirty. It was old. But they also had a building behind the main building that was essentially a dorm. It always smelled really weird in that building because it was a bunch of teenagers with wet socks that just weren't drying out, and we were just freezing all the time, and it was miserable. And so you would go to all sorts of different people's houses at night until you earned the right to go back home on second phase and take kids and take care of kids at that point. So you had very different experiences at different houses, and they advertised it as they're introducing kids back into the family dynamic because they want kids to be back in the family environment as they're getting treatment from Lifeline. The parents paid for the locks, for the alarms, for absolutely everything. There was one girl's house that I remember going to, and she lived in a trailer, and I remember taking a shower at her house, and the plumbing didn't work in her house, so it was cold water. All the dirty water from all the other girls had backed up and filled up the tub. So I'm showering in everybody else's dirty bath water, and her mom just couldn't afford it because she was spending all of her money putting her daughter through Lifeline. And then other houses you'd go to, and they'd have really plush, nice mattresses, really full pantries. The parents were really welcoming, but you could never complain. You could never say anything. There were instances where we were put back into homes where an older sibling or a parent had been to their child or to the other children in the house, and we just had to deal with it. One of my friends that went to Lifeline before I did told me that she was by a dad. If there's one, there's got to be more. That dad had girls coming in and out of his house all the time. I know there were instances of from staff members. I gathered some survivor testimonies, and there was one girl who recently was in Lifeline. It was like 2021, 2022, and she told me that she was by a staff member, and he also made her be with another kid in Lifeline. So he would have two girls that he would force to sexually act out together. He would tell her, like, if you don't have sex with this girl in front of me, I'm not going to let you out of here. I never experienced that personally, but I've had plenty of people tell me that they remember the screams of kids being locked in a room with a staff member. I met my ex-husband while I was in Lifeline. I was a client there. I was 17 when he started working there, and he was in his 20s. And it was not uncommon for an older male staff member to marry a younger female client once she turned 18 and once she started working there. They prided themselves so intensely on breaking children down. They really just wear you down. Hold it in front of your face of, you have the option to have these things if you play by my rules, but then the rules aren't clear and the rules are very confusing. So they would do a meeting once a week where your parents could come and visit you for 15 minutes. You can't tell them anything that's happening. You can't tell them, I'm not allowed to go to the bathroom, I can't drink water, I'm not allowed to talk. Even though they know all of these things are happening, it's considered that you're manipulating your parents to get you out of there. So that was really hard. They had specialty groups that they advertised to the parents, survivors for people who were grief group for people who had experience. I was put in this reactive group, and we had to write really explicit journals that we then had to share with the other girls in that reactive group, the SRG group, being forced to share the story of losing my virginity. And it was a super traumatizing story for me, and that was really scary for me to do, but you have to do it. You have to play the game. My ex-husband, he and I started dating right after I turned 18, and he starts going in on me that I'm such a no one's ever going to want me, I'm such a all these different things. And I found out later from some of the other Lifeline survivors that were also in the SRG groups that my ex-husband and other male staff members would read our explicit journals that they forced us to keep. He apparently read through my journal. These guys then decided once those girls are 18 and out of Lifeline, we're going to date them. And so there was a group of a couple staff members that would go after the girls that were in the SRG groups. Kids who were gay were sent to conversion therapy under the guise of their predators, and they need to be fixed to be a good part of society. And you could tell they were just miserable. Lifeline would take gay kids, send them to conversion therapy, make them watch gay and would strap things to them or put things inside of the girls. And if they had a bodily reaction to the gay, they would be zapped and then forced to smell rotting moose liver, and then they would play straight. And if the kid had a positive bodily reaction, then the kid was fed candy bars. It's so horrible. It makes me so angry thinking about it because they're kids. They're children. They would introduce new staff members to group. And so I remember my ex-husband being introduced to the group, and then he was dating a couple different girls that were working there. And I remember saying goodbye to group because if you graduate, you were allowed to say goodbye to everybody. But my ex-husband goes walking by and he was like, well, there's cookies in the kitchen if you want to go get a cookie. That was my first interaction with him, was him giving me permission to eat a cookie. And I remember like interacting with him a little bit during my volunteer hours. And then eventually I got hired on as a trainee staff member. Once I turned 18, he definitely started talking to me more, would text me about our shifts. And I remember we'd go to like parties and stuff. I'm his second wife. He was married before me. He was getting divorced when he started volunteering and working at Lifeline. And as soon as his divorce was going and he knew he couldn't get his ex-wife back, that's when he started dating me. So I started dating my ex-husband. Things at home with my parents were really tense. They were really upset with me that I wasn't following the rules anymore. And so the first year it was really volatile and really intense, and he was extremely controlling and extremely demanding. Like, if he wanted me around, I better be around in his specific way. He cheated on me the entire time we were together. He made me cut off all of my friends. He made me change my phone number. Really quickly on, he started to call me mean names, really condescending and rude about my infertility issues. And my brain had just been through so much trauma where I couldn't be like, you. I started to have health issues because I have PCOS. So I had my first ovarian cyst burst at the same time. He told me, you're lying, you're making it up, you're faking it. I ended up on the medicine that the doctor gave me for the cyst that burst. He called an ambulance, and then I was in the hospital for a few days. I was pretty determined to not be with him after that because I realized like I had no one and I can't rely on him, so I'm going to rely on myself. It took me multiple times of telling him I wanted a divorce before it actually stuck and before I was brave enough to face the fact of I'm either going to this marriage or I'm going to get a divorce. Those are the only options. My brother happened to be living with me at the time. I told him, I'm going to tell him tonight, we're getting a divorce. I can't do this anymore. I was fully prepared that night because I thought for sure that was going to be my last night on earth. And I think that it didn't go as horribly as it could have because my little brother was living in the house. Because of the divorce, we were selling our house, and he tried really hard to convince me that I shouldn't buy a house. And he kept trying to get my address from me. And I was like, I'm not giving you my address. I don't want you to know where I live. So once I got divorced, I was able to start unpacking the Lifeline trauma. I started researching it, and I found this website called Lifeline Lies, run by an amazing survivor who does so much work to continue to expose practices and just stays really on top of it. It was really a weight off my shoulders to start to unpack it and start to process it. Continuing to talk about it, I think, is important because there's people still waking up every single day, starting to research Lifeline to understand what happened to them. I think that's pretty much everything. I think it's just really important for people who have been through hard things to find their voices. Just because somebody did something terrible to you, it doesn't mean you deserved it. The unfortunate reality is there's still multiple programs like this still open, but they are slowly closing. You're okay to be you. It's not bad to be you. You're not going to be punished for being you. They're very supportive in me being me. So that's been really nice.